Hello and welcome to episode 136 of PubShorts titled Compliance. My name is Dr. KK. I'm the Innovation Officer at Inago and Trinka. And I have with me Tony, who will explain why we are calling it compliance.
Hi, KK. Good morning or good day, everyone, depending what time of day you are in the world. I'm Tony O'Rourke from Inago. Welcome to this latest episode of PubShorts, where we talk about papers relating to articles relating to the world of research and research integrity. We name episodes after songs, and this particular episode is named after the song Compliance by Muse, which I think was from 2022. The song's tension around control and enforced conformity mirrors this week's stories on AI and peer review, whether it's bias, undetectable machine-written reviews, increasing hallucinations, potentially growing calls for external regulation to keep publishers honest. Absolutely, I think, really, really important set of papers to discuss.
Right. So I'm starting with the first story we're discussing. It is an editorial from the Journal of Neuroradiology titled Bias, Accuracy, and Trust. No Gen AI in peer reviewing. This is a sort of a hot take, I would say, because it addresses the critical issue of Gen AI, generative AI, in scientific publishing. And the authors are concerned about the increasing use of AI in scientific publishing, especially regarding with the threat of potential fraud. And they highlight the environmental impact of AI, which is also something that we do not speak about. We always tend to speak about the positives of what AI can do in workflows. But the authors warn that AI generated content could lead to homogenization of science, favoring mainstream ideas over novel ones. And I think earlier this week, Nature also had an article that AI might facilitate more research output from the fields that are popular. That's sort of like suppressing the unpopular fields. So that's another threat we have to keep in mind. And
Yeah.
it also mentions, Tony, something that you've been talking about, the use of AI by students and its impact, raising concerns about assessing genuine learning. And we are talking about plagiarism detection as well as AI content generation as well. So some
Mm.
of the red flags which are facilitated by AI, which are red flags for, let's say, AI facilitated bad actors, would be, for example, non-professional email addresses, unusual publication patterns, all associated with paper mills and predatory journals and everything. So these things can also be sort of, I guess, facilitated by AI. So that's a reason why they are making this argument that they don't want AI in peer review. So a practical suggestion is to ask the authors to avoid AI being used, let's say, illegitimately or irresponsibly, unauthorized AI. What the author suggests is to ask authors to embed subtle context-specific phrases in their manuscript that reviewers must identify, making it harder for AI to generate plausible evaluations. And the authors call for explicit disclosure as well. So basically, two proposals primarily, and I want to ask you: do you agree with the first sort of proposal that you can put in these phrases that AI will find it hard to sort of process? What do you think about
I,
that?
I don't know. I suspect it's only going to be effective for as long as the LLM doesn't learn from it itself.
Right.
I wonder whether that's just a short term fix. I can't see it being a long term fix. What do you think?
Well, it is like sort of like a prompt injection, but in a positive way, that you insert some text that will out the fact that AI has been used irresponsibly. So it might work. We don't know. I mean, this is an interesting suggestion, and I thought, considering that you and I talked about the assistance, the potential for AI to assist peer review and research paper
Yeah,
screening workflows, this is
yeah.
something that we should consider the other side of the argument, where AI should not be, as per these authors, used for such things.
Yeah, I mean, it flags 2 points, one positive, one negative. The positive, look, the horse is the horse, as the phrase goes, the horse is already bolted. We're not going to stop
Right.
authors from using AI, regardless of what publishers or societies or anybody says. That is a fact of life.
Mhm.
Authors are now using LLMs or AI to help them in many stages of the research process.
Mhm.
What they're not doing, and what I do agree with, and what I've been long been calling for, and what we've been calling for in the responsible AI movement, for example, is that there needs to be greater disclosure. There needs to be greater honesty
Mhm.
in the process.
Right.
And as long as there's honesty in the process, then the reviewer can decide, whether it's a legitimate paper or whether it's fabricated. But there has to be a complete openness and
Mhm.
transparency
Yeah,
in the submission.
that we all agree. I think we've been championing the cause for AI disclosure, even for researchers and authors as well. So this would probably flow alongside that. All right, moving on to another research integrity related topic. This is editorial AI assisted letters to the editor. scope of a growing ethical and practical concerns and the clinical orthopedics and related researchers approach to managing it. So, Tony, if you remember in the last episode, we talked about something related to it in the sense that an author had submitted what seemed like 700 commentaries in the last 2 years or
Yeah.
so. So it is very
Yeah.
similar. So this article, the featured article, discusses the surgeon letters to the editor the journal has received, with about half appearing to be written by AI. While they are open to AI for translation and language help, they are finding many AI generated letters are of low quality. And some of the common issues that they find are repetitive phrasing, unnatural word order, invented references, and a lack of a real engagement with the original articles. And they want to encourage dialogue but do not want to flood, as in they recommend a strategy that prevents the flooding of journals like this journal from AI generated papers. And regarding the common patterns that we found, I'm sure that, Tony, you would have had many conversations with publishers who want screening technology to 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 identify the sort of fingerprints of AI generated content, because we are attributing, I mean, we are sort of correlating the presence of these kind of patterns with the potential poor quality of the content itself. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Yeah.
Oh, and I can understand the editor's concerns. I mean, even me with my limited sort of ability to write queries,
Mm-hmm.
could set up a query to sort of to review the literature and create almost like an automated response to any paper in any field,
Right.
based on the LLM's understanding of my knowledge. Yeah, it's a hugely dangerous thing to be able to do, and this kind of activity,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean, I think even the authors don't realize, which undermines the integrity of the scholarly publishing process.
Right.
And we need to do everything we can to educate authors to ensure that they're applying best practice when it comes to AI, that they're not flooding the market. They need to think about the quality of what they're writing, how they're writing it, why they're writing it. More importantly, and it's not just about send as many letters as possible to the editor of this particular journal, and hopefully one or two will get published. It's about, does this piece of content, does it fundamentally reflect or change
Mm-hmm.
the state of knowledge in my
Right.
scientific area? And if it doesn't, then why are you writing the letter in the
Yeah.
first place?
The good news is that AI can help in finding whether a paper is of high quality or not. So
Yeah,
that's something that we'll
absolutely.
discuss. Yeah, right. So
Yeah,
quick infographic. This is a bar chart which shows that in the first 6 months of 2025, we had approximately double what you expect and even more. But out of that, half were likely written by AI, as per this journal's analysis. Anyway,
horrendous.
yeah, right. We talked about the positives of AI in facilitating editorial and peer review workflows, and that's exactly what we are switching to. This is a review article from Journal of Korean Medical Science. The primary argument that it makes is that AI could be crucial for research in the sense that it could be used to detect and correct statistics, and AI is becoming a tool to help with this, especially from the context of editorial and peer review workflows. So simple errors like picking the wrong test can lead to wrong conclusions in a methodological sense. So this can be picked up by AI, and there are some tools that I mentioned. The stat check and the grim test are reported to be good for this. And I personally haven't checked either of these, but I'm going to believe the opinion of the researchers who've written the article. And in general, it also talks about how AI is generally getting better at detecting the quality of science, so that can be a good screening tool which can help peer reviewers and editors to identify these gems within the sea of potentially poor quality content, which is exactly what I think you were trying to say, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, and I think this is a good use of AI.
Mhm. Right.
And
Right.
this kind of complex numerical statistical analysis is, in my opinion, a particularly good use, and it should be a relatively straightforward use of AI. There's no conflict of interest. All you're doing is verifying the data.
Right. And the most important point that the abstract ends with is that human oversight is always necessary to review research processes and
Bang
ensure
on, bang
their
on.
reliability. And so humans must make the final decision and utilize AI responsibly, which is pretty much what the thought behind our own AI peer review assistant is, Tony. And you've been having many conversations with publishers around it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of all they want to talk about at the moment.
Well, AI is all we want to talk about anyway. So, moving on to the next article, it's from Nature. It is titled "A Serious Problem: Peer Reviews Created Using AI Can Avoid Detection." So, this is another the common topic that we talk about. We are talking about how easy or difficult, how reliable or unreliable it is to detect AI generated content. So, the author of the article raises a serious concern with the emergence of AI generated peer reviews, and as per the study that they're reporting on, they found that AI written reviews are hard to detect, and the model Claude 2.0 could write convincing citation requests and rejection recommendations. This overall, so it is very difficult. That is, if we look at things like hallucinated references or tortured phrases, maybe the modern models may sort of skip all of that and give you an output which is not with human oversight, but again AI generated. So this raises concerns about AI unfairly rejecting good research as well. If you're putting AI for screening, the AI might find it difficult to identify such AI-generated papers, which is a problem. And so it talks about zero GPT and GPT zero, etc., which are popular AI content detectors. So the problem with all of this is that with the surge in volumes of submissions, we still need some sort of a like a AI assisted workflows to assist peer reviewers, because it is difficult to find peer reviewers as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because AI is moving forward, it might be difficult to detect these.
And and as we've said in previous episodes, this is an ever evolving piece, and the whole story of AI in peer review, and we're going to see more and more of it in the next 12 to 24 months. Absolutely, I can guarantee there'll be more stories like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should also bear in mind that it's not just AI assisted peer review where papers get missed.
Yeah.
There are plenty of examples of papers which eventually ended up winning Nobel prizes from the past, which failed in the initial submissions to whichever journals they were submitted to, because they weren't considered to be appropriate for their journal, valid enough, novel enough. They may be considered to be too novel. I don't know what the reasons were. So it's not exclusive to AI, but what we want to be able to do with AI is at least provide a mechanism which will support the process and not interfere
Right.
in a negative way.
Right. And moving on to the next story, this is from Wiley Online Library. It's an original article title, "A Cross-Disciplinary Analysis of AI Policies in Academic Peer Review." Interesting. And it explores the integration of AI in academic publishing, specifically focusing on peer review policies. And it highlights that 83% of high-impact factor journals have AI guidelines compared to 75% of middle-impact factor journals. STEM, science, technology, and medicine disciplines tend to have stricter AI policies compared to humanities and social sciences. And the major concerns include concerns regarding AI use include confidentiality risks, accountability gaps, and AI's limitations in replicating human judgment, which is pretty much what we are trying to say here, that human has to always have a overview. And it also brings up the fact that publishers generally emphasize transparency and human oversight, restricting AI to auxiliary tasks like grammar checks, which is something even the STM Association guideline for AI assisted use recommends in terms of using AI, which is permissible. And finally, the study suggests a need for a tailored interdisciplinary guidelines to ensure responsible AI integration in peer review. So, I mean, this is pretty much what we've been talking about, but right now we are also talking about AI used by authors as well. The responsible AI movement is also related to that in terms of making sure that authors, researchers are using AI and disclosing that. So we've talked about peer review and responsible AI. We are also talking about the use of AI in the context of researchers using it. So Tony, your thoughts?
Well, I'm gonna correct you first. This may be on the Wiley Online Library, but this is from Learned Publishing, which is the
Right.
official journal of the Association for Learned and Professional Society Publishers.
Yeah.
So this isn't just any paper.
Okay.
This is from this is a paper from an esteemed journal from a well-respected organisation.
Right.
And any paper that goes into Learned Publishing goes through a rigorous peer review process.
Right.
So if and I know the editor of the journal quite well. And she would not allow anything that's going to be, wrong to appear in the journal.
Right.
I've got nothing more to say here, but I think we know that policies are changing, policies are being evolving. I know firsthand in humanities. I'm working quite closely with a humanities publisher at the moment, whose own AI policies are evolving. So I'm running a workshop for their editors in about a month's time, for example. And one of the things they've asked me to do is to talk about the dangers of AI within their workflow, which I'm going to do, because they're still evaluating, they're still deciding what their policy should be.
Right.
But the reality is, their authors, their editors, their reviewers are all using AI in some way.
Right.
It just needs to be corralled in some way.
Right. At the end of the next story, I'm going to ask you to speak about both the peer review assistant and responsible AI. But before that, there's a Nature Worldview article that we're covering as part of the main story. It's put pressure on publishers to follow best practice. External regulation is the answer. So we have been talking about policies and regulations. So this is related to that. And the author proposes that academic publishing should be subject to external regulation similar to industries like hospitals, airlines, and drug manufacturers. She suggests adopting the ISO 9001 quality management standard for journals to ensure they prioritize both author and reader needs. And the current system, the author argues, incentivizes journals to focus primarily on author expectations, potentially looking the readers' needs for contributing to issues such as slow corrections to faulty papers and the proliferation of AI-generated and paper mill publications. She also points out that the existing oversight mechanisms like the COPE membership and journal indexing have limitations and may not always be transparent or independent enough to effectively address integrity issues. So what do you think of external regulation in terms of all these research integrity related concerns that we talked about in this episode itself?
Yes, I'm generally opposed to central regulation of anything, really. I think there's self-regulation is important. It's really it's a mature and responsible way of allowing the stakeholders to police themselves. However, we're in the Wild West at the moment, I think, to a certain extent, and there is a certain amount of ill discipline being demonstrated by various parties, and there needs to be some kind of mechanism, some kind of control, whether that's government sanctions, whether that's funding agency sanctions. There needs to be some kind of control mechanism in place to ensure, if anything, to ensure the integrity of the literature. If I'm doing research, I want to make sure that this piece of research I'm citing is going to be correct, it's going to be accurate, it's going to reflect, it's going to be honest,
right?
And it's not going to be generated by AI and be filled with hallucinations and effectively fraudulent. I would like, ideally, for the universities or the research organisations to be able to police themselves, but I think that we're a long way from that being effective. So there needs to be some kind of perhaps overarching process in place, like this author is suggesting, that can do that, at least in the short term. Maybe with a view to it being transitioned back to the community after a period of time.
Right.
What other way is there to ensure the integrity of the literature? Otherwise, the literature is useless.
Right. It's the question is whether within community initiatives like COPE, etc., STM Association, can enforce, and from the reader's perspective, this is related to, I think I brought this up in a previous episode of PubShorts, but there was a debate on whether journal prestige, right? Why a journal like Nature is prestigious and people aspire to publish in it.
Yeah.
But with that comes the responsibility of the journal itself to regulate itself so that its content is prestigious and from the reader's point of view. So how do you get that? And the suggestion from external sort of policing the thing is that nothing else has worked and things seem to get worse in terms of research integrity concerns. So from that point of view, external regulation might help turn the ship back.
I would argue that for the very, very top tier journals, it's probably not necessary because they've got the internal mechanisms in place already to ensure quality. Something like I can't give examples directly, but some of these really high impact journals where they're rejecting 90+% of all their submissions, they're doing that because they've got a rigorous peer review process that's already pulling out things like hallucinated AI references. The problem lies with I can't remember how many journals there are now. It's 30,000 active research journals.
40,000 more, I think.
It's a lot. It's in the tens of thousands anyway. And the reason why you submit to those isn't the reason why you would submit to a Nature or to an NEJM or to a Science. It's because you need to have a citation. So they're not, arguably, many of those journals really are more interested, particularly the predatory ones, in simply getting the paper and the money for the APC. and not thinking about quality. So there are going to be bad actors within this space as well, and there's going to be less rigor, in place depending on who you are, what kind of publisher you are. Are you a large society that can afford these kind of structures, or a large publisher, or you're a small publisher that is struggling to keep up?
Right.
With high ambitions in mind to maintain that quality, but it's not always possible.
All right, Tony, as promised, I'm going to quickly ask you to talk about the peer review assistant as well as responsible AI practices, especially considering that we have researchers joining us from the east of Asia or the global south, and if they want to know more. So quick explanations, please. Thank you.
So about about Inago report and about PRA.
No, AI peer review assistant as well as the responsible AI movement.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry. Yeah. Well, let's start with an easy one. So the responsible AI movement is an Inago initiative where we're looking to communicate to everyone, every stakeholder: the author, the researcher, the research manager, the funder, the publisher, the university leader, what responsible use of AI is, what best practice should look like. And we've developed, I suppose, a set of principles which we're sharing with our community, and we're asking leading academics to get behind it and share those principles with their research community.
Right.
And you can find out more about the responsible AI movement on the Inago website. Just search for responsible AI, and you'll find all the information that you need on that. We'd urge you to sign up. A PRA is a product. PRA, peer review assistant, is not actually launched yet.
Yeah.
It's in the final phases of testing now. But PRA is peer review assistant is our AI assisted peer review workspace. So it's at the broadest level, it's a tool which will allow publishers to manage the process of peer review in terms of how a peer review report is created, whether it's author first or whether they're using Inago's AI assisted peer review product to generate the peer review. So it's a tool which will facilitate peer review either as a first review or as a second review or even as a third review. The publisher decides where in the workflow the tool sits. But what it does, it guarantees at least one peer review report. Because as we know, it's becoming increasingly difficult for publishers to find reviewers for certain papers, particularly for new journals.
Right. And where can our audience find more about the peer review?
Again, everything I said about responsible AI movement applies. So just go to the inago.com site and search for peer review assistant, and you'll find some information. There needs to be a bit more information on the site, and that's coming soon.
Right. Thank you, Tony. Ready for quick hits? So the first one is. It's an interesting paper. I'm just going to summarize the key thing. It's titled Causal Evidence of Racial and Institutional Biases in Accessing Paywalled Articles and Scientific Data. So it investigated any biases in this content, and it found that informal sharing practices are influenced by race and institutional privilege. Researchers from the Global South cite paywalled articles and datasets less frequently, and audit experiments show that racial identity impacts the paper request while institutional affiliation influences data requests. So, we know about this, at least because I identify myself as somebody from the Global South. It was difficult for me to find access to research papers back when I was in clinical medicine and thinking about original research. And it basically found it. So, this is a problem that we are all aware of in terms of access to data, as well as, behind paywalls. Do you have any thoughts on this? To fix it, maybe, perhaps?
No, well, and to be fair, the publishing industry has gone, there's STM publishing industry, I should say, has gone quite a long way in the last 20, 25 years in terms of making content more accessible in nations where they may not necessarily have sort of funds that a Western organization might have to be able to acquire or license this content. And I think of things like Hinari, Agora, and there's been a whole bunch of Research for Life from STM, for example, where publishers opt in and will provide free access or very low cost access to research content through these programs. And as long as you're in one of those World Bank defined or whatever the categories countries, then you can generally access this content. I'm not aware, it may be happening, but I'm not aware of the same level of access for other types of content behind firewalls, like the databases, for example. And you can imagine there would be a big requirement there. So if you're using a large engineering database, for example, that's behind a firewall, you're less likely to be able to access that a lower income country than you would from a rich Western economy.
Right, right. All right.
So maybe, and so hopefully there are programs in place. Maybe I'm sure there already are. That will encourage greater dissemination of this content to a broader audience.
Right. Moving on to the next story, Tony. It is related to responsible AI. It is from Ask a Librarian Substack. It is titled "The Problem with Perfect Answers: Gen AI and Academic Research Tool." So, the summary of the article is that it highlights the concerning trend for generative AI tools in academic research, particularly their tendency to produce perfect but often fabricated answers, and that hinder genuine intellectual exploration. So we have talked about hallucinated citations or references as a problem, but also whether students are learning what they were. I mean, they would have learned had they not been using AI. So this is something that we cover in the context of responsible AI, as well as something called DocuMark. What do you think overall? I mean, do you think this is hallucinated references versus whether students are learning or not? Do you think which one of these is more of a concern? Perfect answers, yeah.
It's like saying what's worse, war or famine. I think they're both as bad as each other potentially. Universities need to adapt to find ways for students to want to be able to learn, and to demonstrate their learning in this modern age. At the same time, more advanced researchers who have done their learning need to understand that they are responsible for their content. They are responsible for everything that they write and that they present, and that if they're presenting incorrect references, confabulations, I think as this article called it, they are effectively, there's going to be a mark against them. It's poor conduct.
Right.
So
Interesting.
So to answer your question, I think they're both as bad as each other.
Right, and we have very interesting artwork, AI generated, I'm sure, for referencing
I'm
Alison
sure
Model.
it is.
Yeah, all right. Then the second last story is an archive preprint, Beyond Openness, Inclusiveness, and the Usability of Chinese Scholarly Data in OpenAlex. So this is a research study which benchmarks OpenAlex against a guide to the core journals of China, which is referred to as a GCGC database, and one Fang data, which is another clinical. It is another sort of way to interact with the Chinese institutional data. It examines journal and article coverage and metadata completeness. So OpenAlex indexes a low percentage of journals from GCJC and articles. The metadata quality is inconsistent with missing or incorrect bibliographic details. And I think in the last couple of a couple of episodes before this maybe 134, we discussed how open Alex's metadata regarding author affiliations is already becoming poorer than it used to be. Now we have another problem with the Chinese institutions and Chinese researchers metadata not being accessed. This is a concern, especially considering that a vast majority of at least a lot of research is coming from China, and people would need a strong metadata in indexing, etc., to make sure that the right information is found and surfaced. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, there's not an awful lot I can say really. What it demonstrates is that this is still at a simple level, an economy which is dominated by English language. And if you're trying to present core Chinese language content and with metadata behind it, in that ecosystem, it's going to struggle.
Right.
And I know it's come up in a couple of exercises recently, RFPs, for example, which I've been involved in, where they're saying, look, we don't just want you to concentrate on English language content. We also want you to concentrate on other languages as well. You're going to see a much more effort in terms of how to address and collect that sort of data effectively moving forward, because it's part of the literature as much as anything else.
Right. And the last quick hit that I have, it's a very fun thing. So it is. I hope you get a chuckle out of this, Tony, when you read this infographic. So this is titled. Wait, what is it? The problems with publishers moving to AI-based production. It is from the blog called Daily News. And basically,
thankfully, I'm not dyslexic, so I can read
it. Well, they're talking about a particular firm called, particular, I guess, application, I guess, Strive, which uses AI for publishing tasks and finds a lot of errors within this application. And these are of concerns. I mean, there are different types of errors mentioned, but the overarching theme that I can glean from this is that publishers might be doing I mean, making AI integrations, I mean, they are doing AI integrations faster without quality checking, which might eventually affect the end users' experience. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's too simplistic to say that
Mm,
publishers are implementing these tools without doing the verification. They're absolutely doing the verification, but what they're finding is that perhaps they're not keeping up uh, with the evolution of these products. You know, and that the sort of checking, that the rigorous checking they're doing at the start of the process isn't maybe happening a year or 2 years down the line, and that there needs to be some kind of regular audit process in place
right,
to ensure that, you know, what a product says it can do, a service says it can do, regardless of who it is. I'm not picking on anybody here. It
right.
continues to do that.
Right. Okay. So that brings us to the end of episode 136 titled Compliance. Tony, where can people find all the 135 episodes of
Well,
options?
yes, indeed. So
Yeah.
if you've got a month free, yeah. So if you've enjoyed this episode, we hope you have. Obviously, we encourage you to press the like button and share it with your colleagues. If you'd like to see other back episodes of PubShorts, you can go to our playlist on YouTube. Just search for Inago PubShorts, and you'll get all 135 episodes there. This one will be up there very soon. And we encourage you to leave comments and suggestions for future topics for future episodes. We look forward to hearing from you. And thank those of you who've already commented up till now.
Excellent, Tony. Thank you very much for that. And until the next episode, this is Dr. KK signing off on behalf of Tony as well as the team that helps us.
See you
We'll
next
see you in
one.
the next one. Bye bye.
Bye.